And welcome to the Outsiders. Haven't said that in a couple weeks. We apologize for not being around, but we are back ahead of UFC 253. I am Josh Gross. Of course, that's Jeff Sherwood joining you as always, at least over the last few months here on YouTube. Thank you for watching and subscribing. Jeff, we've been off for a little while, man. Everything good with you? How's life?
Life's going. I mean, there's lots of burning going on and all kinds of crazy stuff. But sometimes life gets in the way of certain things when you no longer do it for a living. Sometimes you have to, change your schedule a little bit. So it's all my fault.
Even when you do it for a living, there was lots of times where I did it for a living and we had to change the schedule. So it's like, that comes with it. But glad you're doing all right. I mean, obviously, everybody on the West Coast who's affected by the wildfires, and in some way we all were to some degree. It's wild. It's just in sort of insane time, things on top of things on top of things. Life's pretty hard. Is this just because we're adults now, or was stuff always this bad for adults, Jeff? Like, what's going on?
I don't know. I mean, I grew up in Orange County, and we used to have fires all the time. But I don't know. Maybe they're just getting bigger. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing. That was a hell of a gender reveal, huh?
It was something. Yeah. What's the kid got to be named? By the way, something to do with some fire, some kind of component, like because.
Right.
You're a patch. Can we get enough of those? Did you ever do those or go to one of those? I've never seen one in person.
Oh yeah, we actually had two here for the grandbabies. So, first
nothing
one
exploded.
No, nothing exploded. You know, we didn't light fireworks off in a field that has seen no water since the beginning of winter. So I don't know if you saw that video, but for those people to light fireworks off in that field and think it was going to be okay, they probably don't need to have a kid because they're probably not very smart. But, to each his own.
Absolutely, to each his own. And we can actually talk a lot about this week, Jeff. We have so much to catch up on. Of course, we didn't do the show for the last 2 weeks. We got to hit on some of the major news items, some of the big fights. Talk a lot about what happened this weekend with Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley and the fallout from all of that. Some big news items kind of in that sphere as well. And then looking ahead to one of the massive fights that you and I have talked about a lot, looking forward to it. And not just Israel Adesanya against Paulo Costa, obviously Dominic Reyes and Jan Blachowicz, and a whole bunch of other great fights at UFC 253 back on Fight Island. I think it's a good place to start just because it does feel in a way chaotic, all this other stuff that's happening in your life. There's a lot of pressures on people's lives right now. Sports are supposed to be an escape, but they haven't turned out to be. Sports are just an extension of where we are culturally, and whatever's in the zeitgeist also affects sports. And so that's certainly what's happening in mixed martial arts. And we can talk a lot about the connection between Colby Covington and Trump and how that's progressed. But he is now taking phone calls from the President of the United States live on television after wins and speaking vocally, not just as a supporter, but really kind of an activist for Trump and using some incendiary rhetoric a lot of people will think is racist. And so I think if you feel it's racist, it's because you have probable cause to feel like it's racist and you've experienced something like that before and it feels that way. And if you don't, then that's just not your experience, but you should probably listen to the people who say it's racist. They have something to say and there's a lot to take away. So that's my introduction, Jeff, to sort of this topic of we're going to talk about fights and mixed martial arts, but it does seem like everything that's happening in the world is permeating this sport and sometimes amplified. And that's what Colby Covington did on the Black Lives Matter issue, the support of Donald Trump, the election coming up. I felt that Woodley against Covington would bring a reaction and would be a kind of fight that culturally mattered that way. And it's proving to be true. What is your feeling on what he said, how he said it, and how people are reacting to it in the wake of impressive victory over Tyron Woodley, who really just no-showed again, but Colby did what he did.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, I mean, we're seeing it in all sports right now. Athletes are pushing their agenda onto us. And which, to be honest with you, I don't really care for either way. The NBA, not that I watched a whole lot of it, but the Bucks were one of the favorites to win it all, and like I watch sports to get away, like you said, to take my mind off of the chaos that's going on in the world, to be able to want to sit back and just enjoy myself and forget about things for a while. And all of the major sports right now aren't really allowing you to do that. And maybe it's just because I love baseball so much, but in my eyes, it seems like baseball's kind of doing it the least amount of the major sports. So I haven't watched football. I've watched a couple minutes here and there. I didn't watch any NBA. I'm still watching the Dodgers. But, I mean, this is kind of becoming the norm. It's just, I don't know. I don't like it. I don't, LeBron James is a great athlete. All these other guys are great athletes. They definitely do something that we cannot do. But I'll form my own opinions and views and everything by myself. I don't need LeBron James, shoving things down my throat. It's just kind of like when somebody would knock on your door and they want to read the Bible to you and stuff like that. Like, I don't like that either. If I want to do that myself, I'll do that myself. I don't need somebody else telling me how I should think, what I should do, how I should feel. And that might not be the popular, viewpoint of things, but I'm just being honest. That's kind of how I am.
I think there's a difference, Jeff, between how you take it in and feel about it, and like sort of the way we get to the point where people have the energy to do these things. And whether you're feeling a little discomfort about it really doesn't matter. It's like people have something to say in a moment that has critical mass, and people feel like it's an important issue that they have to use their platform for. Sports have always been used that way. And I get your point about sort of wanting sports to be a Switzerland, like a neutral place where sort of outside distractions don't come in, but that's not real. Sports have always stepped into that. I mean, you look back to the Berlin Olympics when Hitler was the head of Germany, and you can't escape these things. The Max Schmeling and Joe Louis, and you can't escape these things. Like, it's always part of where we are. And now mixed martial arts has reached a place where unquestionably it is culturally an American sport. You have the president of the United States actively talking about it, interested in it in a lot of different ways, having Dana White and Ali Abdelaziz, interestingly enough, and Colby Covington and Henry Cejudo and other fighters at his rallies. He's calling them out publicly. There's this connection that we haven't seen with the sport before. And so whatever side you're on, people are using the platform to speak. And the way that Colby spoke, I think, is different than an athlete voicing his opinion on a particular issue, expressing why it matters to them. He's actually calling people evil, and he's actually using language that I think most people would call racist. And I agree with some of that. And again, it goes back to people's experience. That's what everybody's like. You may not be enjoying the experience right now dealing with this. Other people voicing their concern are not enjoying the experience of what they're dealing with in their lives, and they're letting you know about it. And so we have to be uncomfortable sometimes, it's my opinion, to move forward in any kind of way in whatever discussion comes. The issue with Covington and the connection to Donald Trump and Dana White's connection to Donald Trump, is it perceived like the UFC is taking sides here? I know Dana said that, we don't curtail anyone's free speech. Like, I know he said that, right? But do you feel like the UFC is picking sides at this point with someone as vocal as Colby, as Dana White, as the boss? And does that matter?
I don't think that Dana has ever really, and maybe he has, maybe I just don't know. And we're just seeing it now with Colby and Dana being so close to Trump. That's a different situation. I don't think we've ever had that situation before. But I don't think anybody ever had a microphone in front of their face before and said something, and Dana or somebody's like, "Oh, you can't talk about that." I mean, being short of having a racist tattoo on you when the UFC got rid of fighters like that and things like that. But as far as speaking their mind, I don't think Dana really puts a filter on anyone. I mean, look at him. I mean, it just free flows.
They make fighters sign non-disclosure agreements, and they've fired fighters for tweets, and they're picky and choosy on that. They're obviously, I'm not in business with them and other media, but they've been pretty unfriendly in terms of First Amendment freedom of speech with reporters and journalists in the space. I just want to chime in and say all that, but as far as this sort of moment in conversation, do you think it affects the way that people outside the UFC world look at the UFC, and does that matter? Does it feel like, oh, UFC's lining up with Trump? Does that matter?
I don't think so. And I mean, we see the sport how it is to us, and we see the sport as being really big, huge. And I think we see the sport as being actually bigger than it is in the outside world.
I don't.
I mean,
I don't think I do. I'll tell you that.
I mean, I think you could go somewhere and to any downtown and interview 50 people, and it would be tough to get somebody that really knew what was going on at this moment in the sport. There will be some, of course, because there are a lot of fans, but when you consider it, like, I mean, if you compared MMA to soccer or the NFL, like, there's a big difference there. But, I will say this, regardless of how you feel, what you believe about Trump, when the president of the United States calls an athlete in the middle of his post-fight interview, that's huge. It doesn't matter who it could have been any president. And I think that's big. I think that's big for the sport, regardless of who it was, which president it was, and how many people dislike him or like him. To me, I looked beyond that and I was like, holy shit, the president of the United States is calling a UFC fighter during his post-fight press conference. That's huge. That's how I felt. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, it is huge, which is why it's worth discussing and kind of understanding, right? There's a lot of components to that. And I'm not surprised. Donald Trump's always been a fight fan and always been involved in the fights. He gets too much credit for saving mixed martial arts, but that's Donald Trump. He gets too much credit for a lot of things. So, like, I think if you try and now understand, if you don't think it's going to make a difference in terms of the public perception or anything like that, and I don't know whether it will or won't, or whether it'll shift or one way or another, it'll have any impact. But, Colby Covington, again, I think used language in a way that was inappropriate. Who is evil, Jeff?
Well,
I mean, who is evil that he's talking about?
Yeah,
he used a lot of loaded language that's really unnecessary and detracts away from the message, unless literally that is the message. If that is the message and that's what you're running on, and it wouldn't surprise me if that was it, then go. But I have a lot of questions for Colby Covington. I'd love to ask Colby Covington a whole bunch of stuff if one day I get a chance to do it. And in the run-up to this election, certainly. And maybe I'll get a chance to do that, Jeff. You know him pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm working on it. So, we'll see. Hopefully you don't scare him off and he starts screaming at you like he was screaming at Usman.
I'm a soy boy, right? I'm a soy boy. He shouldn't be scared of me. I don't think. What is there to be scared about?
Right.
What is there to be scared about? I don't even get soy boy because soy is like one of our biggest exports to the world. Like China under Trump, like bought a shit ton of soy. Like soy is a good thing. Soy makes a lot of money for people. What is soy boy? Why is that a bad thing, Jeff?
Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, even though Colby's getting a little deeper with his comments and everything, we've seen this before. I mean, Conor McGregor got deep into comments about certain issues and things like that. I mean, Israel Adesanya just called what do you call him with his rat lip or whatever he called it, because he has a cleft palate or whatever. I don't know how to say his name. Do you know how to say his name?
You better learn how to say that guy's name pretty quick.
Say it again.
Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev.
Yeah, I'm
Chimaev.
Yeah. That's yeah. See, we both better learn how to say it. I'm not so up on this guy's the greatest.
I think I know how to say it.
Oh, you did? Okay. Well,
we'll talk about it coming up here, but let's just finish up on this thought before we get to the fights. Colby's not the only one who talked, right? A lot of fighters responded to his words over the past few days. They've been asked in the media about it. Most of the black fighters that I've seen that have commented on it have taken offense to it, real issues with it. I think reasonable people are going to hear the way that Covington spoke and have some issue with it. I certainly do. I feel like, again, like how far can he take this? Because, it's one thing to be pro wrestling in a time where what you're saying doesn't mean anything. It's different to be over the top in a very volatile, different time. So, does he have responsibility here at all for the way he's speaking? Where, if anything, where does that lay?
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to feel bad about anything he says, which, whether that's a bad thing or whatever. I think he's at a point now where he's just going. He's got to go.
Does he have responsibility for it? Does he owns it?
Well, I mean, does any athlete have responsibility for what they say? I mean,
they should. Yeah.
I think a lot of
athletes are held to their word. Yeah.
But I think a lot of athletes will say whatever's on their mind, and they don't really. It doesn't really matter if it hurts somebody's feelings or makes somebody feel indifferent. For the most part, I mean, politics and everything, people get real heated about that. And we've never seen a time like
you mentioned McGregor.
Go ahead. We have a delay. Yeah, we have a delay here, I think. Yeah, I think we have a little delay here. But I mean,
we do have a delay. I'm not sure what it's about.
Me neither. Yes. Crappy internet. It's Trump's fault. See? I don't know. I mean, me as a person, the way I take things, and maybe I'm way more laid back, and obviously I'm not a fighter fighting in the same organization as Colby or whatever. So when people say certain things, I just kind of let it go. Like if it's something that I don't care about, or it's not going to directly, I don't know how to put this correctly, but like when people say things that I don't want to hear, I just let it go. That's the way I am. I mean, even from friends, from anyone, like if they say things that make me feel uncomfortable, or I don't really care about, or I don't really want to hear, or whatever, I just move on to the next subject. That's how I am. I've always been that way, and whether it's good or bad, that's the way I am. But I don't have to watch it, right? Just like I said, I didn't watch any of the NBA playoffs, because that's my choice, and that's the way I am. If I don't like it, I won't watch. I won't listen. That's how I am.
You have the choice to do that. I would say that sometimes try and understand why people are trying to make you feel uncomfortable. There's a lot of, things going on outside that larger, than just comfortability. My take on it as well. let's get to the fights. I think it has been harder for me in some ways to focus on these fights just with everything happening in the world. And like you, at this point, it's like enjoying this as a hobby. Obviously, I'm writing a little bit for Sherdog and doing some stuff and hopefully have some other things coming through. But this particular moment, like I'm not like grinding on the sport. And there still are fights that capture your attention. And I think this weekend is one of those fights in and of itself. And then also the card where you feel like, oh man, I'm going to pause and enjoy this, how should we think about the Costa Adesanya fight? Because I'm not saying this is a big narrative that's blown up, but I've seen some questions asked about like, and you want to hear athletes sort of how they think about these things. Like, is this the biggest middleweight fight in UFC history? We have this question almost every card, but again, like I kind of feel like understand it in its context. That's an amazing fight. It's two undefeated fighters who are extremely talented and entertaining, right? But that doesn't make it the best fight or the greatest fight. And it doesn't have to be that to be amazing, right? Why do we even have to frame it that way? So in 10 years from now, we can look back on it and be like, holy shit, maybe it was, and it'd be interesting to hear the questions. But right now, I think sort of thinking about stuff like that robs it some potential, right? We need to walk into it with some expectations, but not like through the roof. And I don't know why we feel the need to do that. How are you feeling expectation wise on this fight as we head into it on Saturday?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that kind of comes from the UFC. I mean, the next card is always the biggest and the best. The next fight's always the biggest and the best. So a lot of the fans have kind of grown accustomed to that. A lot of times, how many fans do you see after a UFC, tweeting, that was the best card ever? Well, like, slow down a little bit, take a step back and really look at things. And expectations, the same, right? Yeah. What were the expectations for UFC 100 back in the day? Sometimes, it's like a good movie when everyone's telling you how great it is and you're like, oh man, I can't wait to see that movie. It's going to be so great. There's been 200 people that have been telling me this is such a great movie. And I go and I watch that movie and I'm let down a little bit because my expectations are so high. So I agree with you. This is a big fight. This is a great fight, but I don't want to go in with my expectations so high that no matter really what happens, I'm kind of let down a little bit in the end. So that's kind of how I deal with these things.
So where are your expectation levels then, Jeff? How are you feeling about it?
I think it's a big fight. I think it's a great fight. Like you said, two undefeated guys, two guys that are amazing athletes, great skill. And it's
Jeff,
definitely, yeah. And I'm looking forward to it. Now there's some other good fights on the card. But really we've talked about the next big pay-per-view being the big thing. So maybe I'm doing that to myself because I'm setting myself up because I've been looking forward to that card, since they've been making some of the announcements and since we talked about it. And I might be building myself up to be let down by that card. I don't know, but for this fight, I know it's a big fight. I know it's two great guys, two great competitors. And I just go in and at this point in time now, I go into a fight just wanting to see a good competitive fight that I can enjoy for 25 minutes or however long it lasts and put a smile on my face.
If that's your threshold, I think you're going to be covered, man. I think you're good. You're going to have a smile on your face afterwards. And actually, Jeff and I will do a live post-fight show after UFC 253. So hop on board with us on Saturday night for that. My feeling is this is a contest of high energy, high pace, high aggression, elite level defense, countering, like the best in mixed martial arts. Maybe some surprises. I think surprises come in the way that Paulo Costa approaches the fight. May try and wrestle a little bit more. Working with Eric Albarracin for a long time now, I think has made a difference in his approach. And this could be a fight where we see him on top using some ground and pound. That'd be a smart way to mix things up. Otherwise, he's really risking a lot trying to fight and strike with Israel Adesanya, isn't he? And the way that they match up, I mean, Costa is a guy that lands the most of any middleweight. I think I saw the stat if I'm getting it correct. And Adesanya is the guy who gets hit the least. So it's like, that kind of combination, I think, is going to lead to a lot of really interesting sequences. I think the pick is Adesanya, but Paul Costa has everything that you could want except for maybe the gas tank. Except for maybe the gas tank. And I think we can see this fight go sort of into later periods, later rounds, third round, fourth round, where Adesanya figured out distance and space and timing and is countering, and then he starts to put it on Costa. That to me is the likeliest way that this goes. Jeff, how do you see it?
Yeah, I think Adesanya is going to have to feel his way in and get comfortable. That's what type of fighter he is. He's usually not that guy that just comes out blazing. Throws some kicks here and there, throws a couple jabs, a couple combinations, but he's all getting his timing down. He's getting Costa's movement down. But Costa hits hard, man. It's one thing, and that's what makes a great fight. That we know how one side is and we know how the other side is, and they're kind of different, but they're both great at what they do. And I think Adesanya is going to do basically what you said. It's going to be a slower fight, but Costa's going to be right there in his face. So, he's not going to be able to, this is a fight that I'm picking Adesanya as well, but I would not be surprised at all if Costa comes out on top. But I'm just looking at how Adesanya could get his timing down, get inside, land those combinations, mix in those leg kicks, mix in a takedown, set things up to be able to do where rounds 3, 4, and 5 are his rounds that are going to be able to shine.
Yeah, it should be an excellent fight. The co-main event is a light heavyweight title fight with John Jones abdicating, moving up to heavyweight. Dominic Reyes against Jan Blachowicz. Again, another excellent fight. To me, you have to expect Reyes to be the winner here. You have, the way that he fought John Jones, the way he went after John Jones, everything he's shown leading up to that fight. Reyes has to be the guy coming in where you feel like he's got all the tools and is ready mentally to win this fight. I don't put anything past Jan Blachowicz. He can absolutely find a path to victory. He can hurt Reyes. He can maybe wrestle with Reyes. But I'm expecting this could be a coronation for Dominic Reyes and a dominant performance from him. Otherwise, even if he wins a decision, there's no stamp on this light heavyweight division. It will require a Dominic Reyes dominant performance for the UFC light heavyweight champion to say, hey, I'm unequivocally number one. And so I kind of expect that. How do you see it?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I've discredited Jan for a while. My thinking is that, if you look at his record, there's guys on there that he should have beaten, especially to get to where he's at now. But there's a lot of question marks on certain fighters. I never gave huge credit to Jimmy Manuwa. I always thought he was a little overrated. And Luke Rockhold, I mean, you never know what you're going to get with Luke these days, if he's hurt or not. Souza is at a different time in his career as well. So I agree with you. I think Reyes is
He's not
here
a light
to
heavyweight either.
right, and I think that Reyes is going to do what you say.
And now I know exactly how long the delay is. It's like 2 seconds. So this is good because we figured it out. Jeff, we missed a bunch of stuff. We missed a bunch of stuff in the last 2 weeks. I want to hit on the key points going through things we missed. All right. A lot of talk about Michelle Watterson taking on Angela Hill or Juan Archuleta and Patrick Mix. You know, what was it? Also, people were talking about Lyoto Machida and Phil Davis, but to a lesser extent, what was the fight of the weekend? What was the fight that was the one that lived up to you the most? Did both? Was one better than the other? And who do you think? What do you think of Archuleta's performance? And also, did you agree with the decision in the Hill Watterson fight?
I thought the best fight of the weekend was Watterson Hill. I mean, that's hard, a hard fight to top. I mean, it was a great fight. And that's the only fight on the card that I watched. But it was action packed. The decision, my first instinct after the fight, I thought that Hill won. I didn't sit there, and for me to enjoy fights now, because for so long, every fight I watched, I was worried about who's winning. If I'm doing play-by-play, I got to score the round. And,
right,
you know, that's fun sometimes. That's neat. But it's so much better to just be able to sit back and enjoy a fight and not have to worry about, okay, she's winning so far. Oh, no, wait. Now she probably took the lead. So unless I'm doing a show right after the event, I don't necessarily do that. But my first instincts after the fight, I thought Hill won. What did you think?
And yeah, I thought Hill did enough to win the decision, but it was a terrific fight, like you said. I thought that they both lived up to the hype, both lived up to the potential of their fight. It was about like the best that both those matchups could have been, and that was a really good thing. Impressed by Archuleta's experience. Like sometimes you can see experience gaps, and that's exactly was the major difference against Patrick Mix, who will be better off for this fight. He's not going to go to 14-0. He's not going to be like this unbeaten superstar that people now all want to hoist all their expectations on, but he's still an excellent young fighter with a long way to go in his career, and I think we'll see a lot more from him. John Fitch retired on that Bellator card, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on him leaving the sport and things that he's done in MMA and how he's used his voice, because he's a guy that's also been a part of some major moments both inside and outside the cage.
Yeah, Fitch is a little bit different. Like you knew every time Fitch got in the cage what you were going to get. But whenever you sat down and talked and had a conversation with John Fitch, you never knew what you were going to get. He was so much more entertaining outside of the cage and normal conversations than he was inside the cage, even though he was phenomenal at what he did inside the cage. A lot of people just don't like that fighting style. Me personally, I don't mind it. I enjoy the wrestling aspect of MMA. But, you know, I mean, John Fitch, that guy beat a lot of guys. That guy was a great fighter for a long, long time. And unfortunately, I think he'll probably never really get the total respect that he deserves. Because I don't feel like he even really got that respect in the UFC from the organization. So a lot of people are swayed that way. Like you can tell, especially these days, it's even worse. Like, if Dana loves a guy, the fans are going to love him because Dana's going to pump him up. Dana's going to talk about him. I mean, see O'Malley. Not saying O'Malley's not a great fighter or just not going to turn into a great fighter, but when Dana pumps somebody up and constantly talks how great they are, how exciting they are, blah, 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 people take notice. Dana never said any of those words about John Fitch, even though John Fitch would just walk into the cage and beat guys time and time again. So I think that, unfortunately, John Fitch will never get, the praise that he should get. But, I'm glad to see him retire at a point where you're not like, man, John Fitch really needs to retire. He really needs to retire. And then he fights 5 more times. So, that's what my thinking is about John Fitch.
Yeah. Very much went out, on his own accord. Maybe hung around longer than some people thought he might, but he never looked out of it physically. He always seemed aware. He was never a guy to take a ton of damage. There were better welterweights at this stage, but John Fitch would still beat a lot of people. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The things I remember most early about Fitch were you at that Pride tryout at UCLA?
No. What happened? What happened?
That was the longest delay for the worst answer we'll ever possibly have.
Right.
Like, there's nothing wrong with your no, but it was just hilarious.
Yeah, everyone was on the edge of their seats. And then it was just a no.
The delay is really bad. So, all right. So I remember John Fitch. No, I know. And it was like, no. Anyhow, John Fitch tried out for Pride. I think the tryouts were in 2003, and it was at the men's gym at UCLA, on the campus of UCLA, and a bunch of people showed up. It was like a Pride tryout, really, like trying to find local talent in Southern California. There's a bunch of fighters there, and that's where I met John Fitch with Bob Cook, and we had a conversation, and Bob really said, hey, this is a guy you got to watch out for, Purdue wrestler, the whole deal, how Fitch got involved with Purdue wrestling and Tom Erickson and all that. So he didn't get chosen. I think KJ Noons got chosen. Didn't really go anywhere with Pride, but imagine had Pride chosen Fitch, how fortunes may have changed in this sport. You never know. And then, obviously, I think of Fitch as, the face of really that whole deal with the video game perpetuity, the likeness rights, the rights fighters have and don't have. Sort of that was a make or break moment on that issue in this sport. And, Fitch and everybody at the American Kickboxing Academy and everybody in the sport, because they weren't the only gym that was presented with that ultimatum, they all gave in, they all signed. And so, that's definitely a kind of a critical moment as we work our way through whatever mixed martial arts ends up looking like in the next 15, 20 years. I think people will be pointing to that moment in time as a pretty important one. So John Fitch, did a lot of things. I want to talk about similar vein. The antitrust lawsuit, Jeff, I don't know how closely you're following the antitrust lawsuit between fighters in the UFC. And there's a potentially key ruling that's on the way. The judge said that he is likely to rule in favor of the fighters, that they will be awarded a class, which means they can file a lawsuit as a class action lawsuit, represent about 1,200 fighters in one lawsuit, and that it will probably move forward. That's a big deal. And we don't get too much into it because there's a long road to go here. It's likely going to be appealed. The judge is probably going to say okay to certain metrics that are unique and never been used before in antitrust law. So, maybe some big case law precedent here involving this one. But that's something to watch out for. That's a big news item. I wrote a piece about on SureDog about it. And so that's something to watch out for, Jeff. And I'm not going to stop because the delay is terrible. I'm going to keep going to the next one. The smash factor, my friend. You brought him up earlier. Khamzat Chimaev. He will smash you. He seems like he'll smash everybody, but then the guys he's beaten in the UFC are 7-8 in the UFC, and hey, it's impressive, but like I'm like a pump the brakes guy. I didn't pick John Jones to beat Shogun. I probably should have done that. I didn't. So I'm a slow to identify guy sometimes.
Right.
What do you think? Is Khamzat the next evolution of Khabib Nurmagomedov, or what?
I'm a pump the brakes kind of guy as well. I look at competition of his competition. Everyone always is so quick to, labeling somebody as the next great thing. What was it? Didn't Dana say that Nover was the next Anderson Silva at one point or something like that? I'm just like, okay, let's see him fight somebody in the top 15, close to the top 10. And because we all know, as opponents get tougher and tougher, it just doesn't work out that way. So, yeah, he's been impressive so far, but who has he been impressive against? And that's my biggest question. And that's what I always ask. So I'm a slower type of guy too. Like, what have you done for me lately and against who? That's going to make what my opinion is.
Yeah. Dana White through the roof. He's like, I've almost never seen anyone like this guy before. That's Dana promoter talk. Fair enough.
Right.
He's smashed people, no question about it. I would like to not see him fight Damian Maia. Like, can we no to Damian Maia, please? At 170, how about like a Jeff Neal? Neil Magny? Give me those two. I want to see him fight one of those two guys at 170, and then we can move forward. But hey, the smash factor with Khamzat, way to go. Jeff, Michael Chandler signs with UFC. What's your reaction to this?
Didn't I say that was what was going to happen? Great. I that's where I wanted him to.
So yeah, tell me.
Yeah, that's where I wanted him to be, because I'm selfish, and I wanted to see how he matches up against the greatest fighters in the world in his weight class. And that's going to happen in the UFC. So there's going to be, once he starts fighting those guys, there's going to be no more unanswered questions, right? We're going to know exactly where he sits in the food chain. I think it's going to be pretty damn high.
It could be high. We know it's behind Patricio Pitbull. We know that. And that's not a guy who's usually fights a lightweight. So Chandler's a great fighter. There's a lot of great fighters at 155. The talent, the depth in that weight class, it's unbelievable. And so to see him in that mix, and we have the chance to see fights we haven't seen yet. That's what I always felt like with Chandler. It's like he was fighting good guys, really good guys, some great fighters, but there was too much recycling. So now we get to see him fight names that we haven't seen before. It looks like he'll be somehow involved in that card next month, Jeff. They're looking for an opponent for him. Is there one fighter in particular that you think in a month's time would be like the fight you'd want to see above all else? What would it be?
I don't know who's scheduled for fights because it's so hard to keep track of that now. But the one thing that I will say that kind of, this is me backing up my argument, and I don't want to sound disrespectful to Bellator because, like you did say, he's fought some great fighters, but now he's in the UFC. I think for the most part, especially somebody like Chandler, this is kind of like a new life. And I think it's going to light a little more fire under him. I think it's going to make him a little hungrier. And, I want to see him fight a top 5 guy. I think he needs to go right to the top and fight somebody.
Is he the guy that needs more fire? He's got all the fire already. He doesn't need more fire.
Yeah, but like you said, it was recycled fights. How hard? I mean, when you're training for a fight against a fighter you've already fought before, or somebody that you should beat, are you putting those extra rounds into the gym? I guarantee you, now that he's in the UFC, he might anyways, but I think it's going to be a little more fire. He's going to put those. He's going to want to go to the gym every day and train harder because he knows that he's going to fight a killer every single fight in the UFC now.
Yeah, I think he's already that guy. Like, I already think he's that guy. So I think he's training and preparing as best as he can. He's super professional. I think he'll do well in the UFC. There's lots of fights he can win, and I'd love to see them. He's got to get off on the right footing, and he'll be prepared. Michael Chandler's a hell of a fighter. Jeff, that's it for the return of The Outsiders. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it. Glad you are well and your family's well, and the fires and everything. We're starting to sort of come out of that a little bit in a good way. We'll be back Saturday. Yeah, we'll be doing a live recap of 253. 2 title fights in the UFC. Should be a really good night. So thank you all for watching. Jeff, talk to you on Saturday. Take care.